Hi everyone, I'm Lisa.
And I'm Nick.
And welcome to It Takes Two, the podcast where two people take two movies with the same plot or premise and watch and discuss them.
And continuing our Pride Month, we watched The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar.
One of the things these have in common is very long titles.
Yeah, to the point where I couldn't even get it out in one go.
We're probably gonna not call them by their full titles again for the whole rest of the episode. It'll probably just be like Priscilla and To Wong Fu. I don't know. Yes, these are both road trip movies about drag queens. Essentially, that's what you can boil them down into.
Like, they even have the same sort of character archetypes, which is interesting. Both with Chi-Chi and Guy Pearce, who I can't remember his name.
One of the interesting differences between the two films is that in To Wong Fu, they are in drag for the whole movie. Like, they get into drag in the opening sequence, and they're never out of drag. Whereas in Priscilla, one of them is a trans woman, but the other two are cis gay men who are drag queens, and we see them as the men they are and as them as queens. So his name is Adam, but her name is Felicia, and that's the same person.
Huge casts. Like, maybe not at the time, because one's 94 and the one's 95. But
so I think the American one, the cast that they got were people who were already big, whereas for the Australian one, Priscilla, those are people who became big afterwards.
Yeah.
So I think Guy Pearce had been in Neighbours and Home and Away before then.
Yeah, he was definitely a TV actor before.
Yeah. But very few films. I think Hugo Weaving had been in a bunch of things, but like art house and indie films is what I meant to say.
Arty in-house.
Yeah, arty in-house films. Terence Stamp, I'm not sure what he had done before then.
It's interesting because going through his all of these people are very recognizable.
Yes.
And it's interesting to have such I don't know, I guess, not for me personally, but I know for a fact that, especially with Priscilla, Queen of the Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, they were, like, really, like, touching childhood memory movies for people, which is, like, for me, it's not my bag, baby.
Yeah, the one main thing, before we get into proper spoiler territory, if people are listening to this and they haven't watched the movies, I think what both of them did, but maybe more To Wong Fu, which was important at the time, so mid-90s, was that they both are queer films about queer characters who for most of the time are just having a good time, who are living their best lives, who are accepted by the majority of people, or who find acceptance in people throughout the film, and they're just happy. Whereas a lot of films around that time about queer people would have been films about the AIDS crisis.
Because the one that always comes to mind for most people is Philadelphia.
Yeah, because that's mid-90s as well, isn't it? And there's a lot. There was a lot of films around that time that really focused on the AIDS epidemic and on, and I actually saw, when I was researching these films, I saw an article by someone talking about how important they were, but saying that up until that point, most mainstream queer films were being aimed at straight audiences, and they wanted to give them someone sympathetic to care about. So they'd be like, oh, the poor gay man has AIDS, I feel sorry for him.
Yeah.
Whereas this was like, no, we're happy, we're living our life happily, we're proud of who we are, and we're just having a good time. And I think that was revolutionary for the time.
Yeah. I also like how both the titles are just so bizarre.
Yeah.
Because in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, or Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, Priscilla is the name of the bus.
Yeah, Priscilla's the bus.
And in To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, it's literally a portrait that's on the wall of a restaurant that they steal.
And that's legitimate, by the way. That's where the writer got the title from, was he saw that actual picture on a wall in a Chinese restaurant.
Yeah.
And he wrote this film.
As you do.
Yeah, so literally that was where the name came from.
Heading back to... Yeah, you nailed it pretty successfully. They are road trip movies, which obviously with every road trip, every road movie, my favourite obviously for being From Dusk Till Dawn. Hey, it's not Quentin Tarantino, it's just got a minute. It's Robert Rodriguez. The adventure is the road.
Right.
And it's your characters interacting with people that, especially in To Wong Fu, where they come across a cop who's racist and sexist and a bigot, and continues this investigation after
the epitome of toxic masculinity.
Yeah. And then for Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, obviously they're in a situation where they're leaving Sydney, which is the safe, accepting area. Same for Priscilla, which is leaving New York.
New York, yeah. And going to rural.
Yeah, they're going to a rural area, and I think the in To Wong Fu, it's a little bit more comical. It's a little bit more lighthearted. Some situations aren't, but I'm saying, like, in general, the locals aren't. Wow. You can say that in both ways, but they're not... there's no point in time where the convertible Cadillac they rent doesn't get some horrible, bigoted shit spray painted on the side of it.
Right. It's interesting, yeah, because in both films, they have to kind of stop over in a town after their vehicle breaks down.
Yeah.
And it's funny because in To Wong Fu, most of the movie takes place in that town.
Yeah.
But in To Wong Fu, the only person in the town who's bigoted against them is the mechanic.
Yeah.
Whereas
and he's also like a real huge piece of shit.
Yeah, absolutely. Whereas in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, the only person in the town who isn't bigoted against them is the mechanic. Who ends up going on the road trip with them, and there's a love story blossoms between him and Bernadette, who's the trans character.
We shall talk about Bob and his previous relationships later on.
Yeah, interesting stuff. But yeah, it's interesting that you brought up Sydney as a safe place, because they talk about it quite late into the movie. They talk about it, and what they say is, I think it's Bernadette says it to Adam, and what she says is, like, as much as we make fun of the town or the city that we're from, we mock it, it really was protecting us.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have to face all this prejudice in there to this extent.
For a person who's not travelled that much out of New Zealand, but when I have been to Australia, even Australians sort of have a Sydney is the queer city.
Right.
It's just like that's the label that sort of, it's very inclusive, but also it's sort of like New Zealand, for example, has, I think, a worse attitude towards other cities depending on where you are.
Right, okay.
From everyone hates Auckland.
Everyone hates Auckland.
And Aucklanders hate the rest of New Zealand.
Yeah.
You go to Queenstown and it's just horribly racist. And
yeah, I mean, that's where I personally have experienced anti-immigrant stuff was in Queenstown, where people heard my accent and were legitimately shit to me. Yeah. Which was an experience, one which I'm sure people who are not white get on a much more regular basis.
Yeah, it's not just immigrants they hate.
Right.
sorry for any listeners in Queenstown, but your city's got a rep, so you should probably look into that.
Speaking about cities with a rep, the town that the characters stop in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, called Broken Heel. So that place where they meet Bob and where the people are kind of shitty to them. Oh no, it's not. Sorry, no, that's the second place. No, they stop. Broken Heel is the first place they stop, where the woman approaches them at the bar and tries to tell them that they don't serve their kind. Stuff like that. Yeah, so that's the first place they stop. The reason they included that town in the film is because it legitimately, in real life, had a reputation of being very discriminatory towards queer people. And since the movie came out, it is now has an annual drag festival and a parade that passes by the hotel that's in the film.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah. So they've actually, the film actually legitimately changed perspectives of a town that had a really negative reputation at the time.
That's good. You hear that, Queenstown?
So what we need to do is we need to make
an immigrant and minority parade through Queenstown.
Yeah, so we need to make a film about immigrants in Queenstown and change perceptions.
Yeah, we'll get right on that. So our producer, Strider, will contact our favourite actors. So we'll get...
Well, I mean, it has to be Carl Urban because he's actually from New Zealand.
Yeah, we'll get Carl Urban, we'll get Sam Neill.
100%. Reese Darby, can we get him?
Yeah.
Yeah,
just everybody who
Jermaine Clement, you just walk down the street and find him.
Yeah.
If you just stand in one spot long enough in Wellington, you'll run into Jermaine Clement. So I'm sure we just put Strider on the corner and...
he'll hand out his business cards.
Yeah.
Or his business cards. They're just paw prints. I think before getting too further on, into Wong Fu, both the two sort of main I wouldn't say characters, but definitely the main drag queens, one played by my boy Patrick Swayze and the other one played by my other boy Wesley Snipes.
Yeah, I was surprised when you said my boy followed by Patrick Swayze rather than Wesley Snipes.
So they're in the... It's really weird because the title is... What is it? Drag Queen of the Year. And they're they're in the group with Chi Chi, who's played by John...
Leguizamo.
Yeah, thank you. Because you knew I wasn't going to pronounce that correctly the first time. They're finalists for Drag Queen of the Year. And then they both win it. And they both get the ability to go to the Drag Queen of America contest, which is held in not in New York.
In Hollywood.
In Hollywood. And because instead they find Chi Chi, who's played by John, and crying in the stairs because they wanted to win, and
I think we can use she, her pronouns for the characters in Tu Wong Fu because they remain in drag for the whole film.
That makes sense.
Yeah. The confusing ones will be Hugo Weaving and what's his name, Guy Pearce in Priscilla, because they switch depending on what scene it is.
I'm just gonna go by the actors' names, just to not put my foot in my own mouth. So they take John, Chi-Chi, and so they meet up with Robin Williams, which is really random.
I was surprised by that cameo, because I hadn't seen either of these films before.
Yeah, I'd seen both of them. Yeah,
you'd seen both of them.
Yeah, I'd seen both of them.
Oh, you told me before we watched them. You said you'd only seen.
No, because then
Priscilla.
When starting watching it, I was like, oh no, I have watched this movie. Yeah.
So this is I mentioned it on our previous episode, but this was suggested by my mom, and that was her experience. Is that she keeps forgetting that they are two films. So she gaslighted herself into believing that there was only one film.
With just 6 people in it.
Yeah, she just couldn't remember. She thought it was Guy Pearce and Patrick Swayze in a film together. And I was like, no, Guy Pearce is in one of them, Patrick Swayze's in the other. But they are, I can understand because they come out quite close to each other and are quite similar.
The other cameo in Tu Wong Fu that I recognised when the credits started playing but didn't remember because obviously they weren't as large of a personality and such a force within the community, which was RuPaul being in it.
Right, yeah, no, I recognise RuPaul as soon as he was on stage
Yeah.
in the film, and it was interesting because when I looked at the trivia for it, all of the drag queens in both pageants, except for the main characters, are actual drag queens who were like popular drag queens at the time.
The Confederate flag dress was a bit
Yeah,
weird.
I took a note of that. I don't even remember was that. Oh yeah, I just said Confederate flag dress has aged poorly.
Yeah. So yes, they're on a road trip because they were supposed to get one ticket to go to fly, and obviously two of them won, and then they're dragging Chi-Chi along, so that's why they have to. And then Robin Williams gives them the option to go see his mate, who dropped my name, and they'll get you anything on the lot for like cheap. So that's how they end up in the Cadillac convertible.
Yeah, because they couldn't afford, so they were selling their flights to get, and then trying to get other transport. And so Noxema, which is Wesley Snipes' character.
It's like, I'm not going on a bus.
Yeah, she refused to go on a bus, which I thought was funny because I knew we were watching the movie about the bus. And they couldn't afford the train.
Yeah.
So their option was get a car and drive.
That's a lot. Because it's interesting. I'm just going to go on a random tangent here. America's rail network is really screwed up for like a first world country. They have the most bizarre rail network.
It's because it was developed as they were spreading people across the country. You just got to watch Once Upon a Time in the West because that's all about the creation of the rail network.
Yeah, it's interesting because like you look at countries like Japan who have insane public transport, and they have bullet trains that go 400 kilometers an hour, and they're on maglifts, and like it's all crazy awesome, and 45 minutes to get from one side of Tokyo to the other. Like, where in reality, if you were doing that through, like, they just don't have the network. And I guess it's interesting because like I see memes all the time, and it's like a cat in a cowboy hat and a pickup truck, and it's like I've been driving for 10 hours and I'm still in Texas. It's like America is huge as a country, but they have no decent rail network. Like their rail network was based on moving goods rather than people.
Right.
And because of that, like, but it's so weird because when I think of Western as like the genre, I think trains.
Yeah, because
they were the most advanced form of technology, and they just sort of did absolutely nothing with it after that. They were like, cool, we're out of the Western era, we're into the like build up mega cities in small places. How do you get there? Well, you fly, because that's what you do in America. You fly everywhere.
Well, I know my cousin took a train from Chicago to LA, but it was, I think, an overnight train. I don't know how long it took. I looked into going, when I was living in Canada temporarily, I looked into getting a train from Toronto to Vancouver, because I just thought it would be a cool trip to take, but it was ridiculously expensive and took like 6 days on the train.
That's insane.
I was like, I don't want to.
Because I grew up taking the train a lot. Like, I know New Zealand's a smaller country than most, but it was only an afternoon, and you're comfortable. You can get up, you can walk around. Like, trains are like so much better than buses. Mm-hmm. Buses are, like, I agree with Wesley Snipes. Buses are horrible. I don't even like going on buses around Wellington, let alone like.
Yeah. I've done, the longest I've been on a bus was a 14-hour trip, I think.
Yeah, no, my butt would be beyond asleep. My butt would be in a coma. Sorry, rant over, back to where we're going. So they're going from New York to Hollywood. Yeah. In a convertible. In Priscilla, obviously Priscilla being the boss. The boss. They get it from a school.
No, he bought it from Swedish tourists.
That's right.
Yeah, so I think Bernadette assumed it was borrowed from school because she was like, when do we have to go back to school? He's like, oh no, we own it. I bought it from some Swedish tourists.
That's right.
And for $10,000. And it sounds like he extorted the money out of his mother by pretending that he was going on a road trip to try and get over his phase of being gay. Yeah.
Oh, that's because it's Guy Pearce who's the rich one in this movie, where it's, I was going to say Hugo Weaving, but it's
Patrick Swayze?
Patrick Swayze, who's from the upstate.
The wealthy family,
the upstate New Yorkie, manners. and the reason they're going is because his ex-wife is managing.
Not ex-wife, they're still married.
Sorry, his wife is managing a hotel in Alice Springs, which, if you don't know anything about the geographical nature of Australia, that is in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Yeah.
It is the closest town to I can't remember the name of it.
Uluru?
Uluru.
Is that I?
Yeah,
Not
that's
sure how you pronounce it. Yeah.
and I actually have a friend that lives in Alice Springs, and one of the things he showed me when he came back to New Zealand, because he's originally from New Zealand, was a photo which I quote all the time, which is a sign on the outskirts of town, and there's multiple exits out of the town, but multiple signs that literally say, if you do not have multiple days of water and X amount of petrol and spare tire and like a sat nav, you will die if you go past this point, because there is nothing for like 14,000 kilometers.
Yeah, I was thinking that when...
1,400, sorry.
I was thinking about that when they set off through the desert, and I was like, oh... And I was like, well, they do have a bus, so hopefully they've filled it with enough stuff. But then it does break down in the middle of the desert, and I was like, oh, they all dead.
Yeah. In Priscilla, there is a fantastic side plot that is going on the entire time.
It's the woman
crossing? Who's going to cross Australia on foot.
It's so, yeah.
And they keep passing her, and then they break down, and then she passes them, and there's a moment where they try and speak to her, and she just keeps running, and they're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, because she sets off at the same time as them, and the funny thing is, the joke is that she's got like 3 people there cheering her on, and they've got like
this huge crowd.
All of their drag queen friends or whatever, all cheering them on as they take off on the bus, and yet she's just like keeps going, whereas they have planned terribly.
So we've got the why and the how. The characters are interesting. I think Patrick Swayze and Wesley Snipes are the 2 more experienced drag queens.
Yeah.
John is playing the what do they call her? Drag princess.
Yeah, well, they keep referring to her as a boy in a dress.
Yeah.
Because they're saying, you're not a drag queen yet because
you haven't gone through the 4 steps of becoming a drag queen.
Yeah.
Which I think they only explained 2 of them, which I think I didn't...
No, they definitely got to step 3, but I don't remember what step 4 is.
Yeah.
I think it's on the IMDb trivia, so I'll find it later on. But yeah, it's interesting because the first time that they interact with Chi-Chi, she's on the stairs just like crying after they've won the competition, and Patrick Swayze literally looks at her and is like, why is the little Latin boy crying? Can you find out why the little Latin boy is crying? And I was like, what is this? I think, they both films deal with discrimination a lot.
Yeah, well, as you do, and that's, I think, why they're such, well, especially Priscilla is such a cornerstone for people who are struggling and obviously dealing with their own forms of discrimination. It's
interesting. I'm actually going to do a bit now that we normally do later on in the film, or in the episode. I just want to talk about box office numbers. Because I have never heard of To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. I literally had never heard of it until my mom suggested it for this. Priscilla I've heard of. I've heard of it a bunch. I know there's like a whole musical based on it. I hear people talking about it a lot. I've just never gotten around to watching it. And yet, To Wong Foo did better in the box office.
Interesting.
I don't have the budget for To Wong Foo. So the budget for Priscilla was $2 million.
Which is pretty reasonable for 94.
Yeah, I would imagine To Wong Foo's budget would be higher because A, it's an American film rather than an Australian film, and B, the actors that they got in it were at their prime or like were pretty big names at that time. Like Patrick Swayze in 1994, you're paying a pretty penny, you know what I mean? John Leguizamo, obviously fresh off Super Mario Brothers.
We don't know. No. End of podcast.
No. So I don't know what the budget was, but I imagine it was probably slightly more, but maybe not a huge amount more. But apparently internationally, or in full international box office, Priscilla only got $12.4 million, whereas Tu Wong Fu made $47.7 million, which is quite a disparity. But I just find it really interesting that, as you said, The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert is like such a cornerstone for queer people and marginalized people, and even non-queer people. Like, a lot of people love that film, and it's had such success in later years, and it's become a real classic, and there's a whole musical based on it that's very popular, and yet it was of the two films, it was the one that was closer to being a flop. It was obviously not a flop because it was only $2 million budget, so it made 6 times its budget.
Yeah,
but
it's interesting though, because despite the fact that there are critics and there are people who take what critics say as gospel, reality is movies aren't like, there are movies that win Oscars and then after that year they're completely forgotten about.
Yeah.
No one remembers them, and then you go back and you're like, oh, this movie came out this year, it must have won the Oscar, and you look and it got passed by a movie you've never even heard of, and you're like, what the hell is going on?
Who's even seen Green Book? No. I saw it in cinema.
I haven't, so I don't even know what it's about. And you look at and I think the problem with, I know I love you, I love you, and I know you love the Oscars, but there are certain times where they make decisions that are just very weird.
Oh yeah, no, the Academy is screwed up, and it's a bunch of old white men, and half.
That's not true. One of them's a nun.
Okay, it's largely a bunch of old white men, but half the problem with the Oscars is that the people voting for the films aren't watching all the films.
Yeah.
So people have called for this, and I think it would be a great idea, but there should be a way for you to for the Academy members to check off the movies they've seen, and then they'll only be given options to vote in categories where they've seen all the nominees.
Yeah.
Because that's what they should do. Because I think, obviously I have a lot of friends who are animators, and I think animation is one of the categories where they just don't watch them. They just think, they're kids' films.
They just pick the Pixar movie that came out that year.
Yeah, or they say I've heard kids talking about this one a bunch.
Yeah.
Let's vote for Encanto and forget that some fantastic films came out.
Yeah.
Not to throw shade on Encanto, but
yeah, I enjoyed that movie. The big one that sticks out in my mind, because there was a lot of controversy about it, was which, don't get me wrong, this movie it deserved to win.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not American, and I know for a fact that my family were never involved in slavery, either participating or being victims of. But when it turns out half the Academy members that voted for 12 Years a Slave didn't even watch the movie, you're like, oh, why?
Yeah.
That is a cornerstone of this is your history.
Yeah.
Face it.
Yeah.
Understand how evil this is, and then realize that you done goofed, and you have to now go and fix it now, because there are people still suffering from prejudices dating back to, the formation of their own country. But yeah, it's interesting, because then even now no one talks about that movie, and it's interesting because you have movies that do well after they're outside of the theatre.
Yeah.
And they become cult movies, and sometimes they get picked up by the wrong crowd, and the people who like the movies don't understand them. But it does still have a cultural impact, and I think movies that have cultural impact are far more significant than maybe movies that make lots of money.
Yeah.
Side note, Avatar made lots of money, but the whole thing about James Cameron is he's pushing technology. Mm-hmm. He's pushing technology. You might not like his movies, but he's doing something insane to make the next step for movie production. And
even if that means drowning his cast members.
Yes, including if that means some cast members have to drown to to just push that envelope just a little bit. He's raising the bar, all right? He's raising the bar for everybody else. Without Avatar, we wouldn't have had that in top, 3 years of every single friggin' movie that came out was also in 3D, to the point where they were making movies that weren't filmed in 3D.
Yeah, but also without Avatar, New Zealand's film industry wouldn't be what it is because Weta stepped up to the plate with that because they had done a bunch of work with the Lord of the Rings films and James Cameron was like, hey, I want you guys on this, and it really that's a massive stepping stone to pushing New Zealand filmmakers out into all sorts of areas, know. And the VFX, because Weta VFX have worked on Marvel films and all sorts of films nowadays.
Yeah, it's interesting watching, going through the credits of Marvel movies, and it's like, oh look, Weta were there. Like, what, doesn't Disney have their own? No, they still rely on old New Zealand for fixing things. And it's even that with, there was some controversy around people that were let into the country, even though New Zealand was locked down before other countries were during COVID the first time around.
James Cameron again.
Yeah, people that were but it is, the government did borrow like $10 billion from us taxpayers, and then, you got to get some of that cheese back. You got to get the cheese back somehow, and if you're going to get some rich film production getting into the country to just keep the ball rolling, you kind of have to do it. And we all knew where they were, in the QT hotel, to the point where my mate who was working at the local supermarket was warned by the police when they'd come to visit to do their shopping because it was a big deal. We're way off the mark here, but that's fine. My point still stands. Movies that last forever based on the fact that they're actually culturally significant are more important than movies that make lots of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ergo for these two movies. One of them did better. You'd never even heard of it. I'd watch both of them because the reason I remembered that I watched both of them is because I remembered the scene in the beginning where they're putting their makeup on.
Right.
And I was like, wait, I have seen this movie.
But did you also amalgamate it into your memory of Priscilla?
No. Because my memories of Priscilla previously to this were something I will point out as being a little bit sub-reality.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell? Are they stopping on the side of the road to set up these massive sequences that no one can see? With them singing in these massive dresses on the roof.
On the roof, yeah.
No one's around.
They have so many. That's the suspension of disbelief for me in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert is how often they have costume changes.
Oh my god! Even in the final sequence, they have so many costume changes without missing a beat of the music.
Yeah. I was like, you're singing the same. It's not the final sequence. I think that one's. They stay in the same costume, but it's when they're in Alice Springs, they sing one song, but they change costume 5 times seamlessly, and their makeup changes and everything. And it's like it's like, why not do a medley of different songs if you're going to do that? Because this makes no sense. But there's a bit where they're out in the middle of the desert at a campfire with a bunch of guys, and
I did like that. So
I like the scene, but what I'm saying is that they're sitting there in their regular outfits, and then they're like, okay, let's put on a show, and then they just. Are in drag.
Yeah, and where's the guy who rescued them?
Well, he isn't, and then he is halfway through the song.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, there is a little bit of sub-reality going on.
Well, but also in To Wong Fu, there's a scene where they are decorating the room by just throwing things,
stuff
and it
just magically appear. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Obviously, what we've learned from these films is that drag queens have
magic
powers, but only to do with costuming and design.
This does not spark joy.
If any drag queens are listening to us, let us know if this is true, if you do have magic costume powers.
Yeah. The bigotry that they both face, I think, for Tu Wong Fu, it's more along the lines of, I don't know, it's just, especially when they're in the rural areas, I think it's just, people look at them as outsiders, and they look at them as such this, weird, unusual, they can't quantify, can't put in a box for their, little worlds. Where in Priscilla, it's more of a like LGBT community, especially gay men, were blamed for the AIDS epidemic.
Yes.
And there were some cases, but that was also media hype. That I remember listening to a series Radiolab did years ago called Patient Zero, and they were going through different patient zeros, and it was the Canadian air host who was blamed for the AIDS epidemic in America, and then it turns out that that was all, the evidence was not as accurate, and they basically blamed this person. Oh, it's all this person's fault. It's they were the Typhoid Mary of AIDS in America, but in reality it wasn't. Where Typhoid Mary in reality was told multiple times, stop being housekeepers for people, we're going to put you in jail, you have typhoid, stop giving it to people. And she's just like, no, I'm going to change my name to Mary Jo and go work for these people. And I think that's, I love the sequence where they arrive in the town and the Cadillac's broken down and they're told that they have to stay, and then they just start interacting with the locals. And there's the beauty salon, and then they find all the 60s dresses, and then they all come out and they're all looking dolled up to the nines. It's hilarious because they're just because you see what they're wearing before, it was like a breath of fresh air, but the fresh air being just because I think Patrick Swayze's character says it, what makes a drag queen is just a person that has too much fashion sense for one gender.
Right.
And that's how you become a drag queen, is you just have so much fashion sense that it explodes out of you. And I think that was the influence they had, Wesley Snipes' influence was a little bit more hands-on, joke intended. Right. Where someone's giving the local boys, the good old boys,
the lads.
The good old boys, the roughnecks, as Chi-Chi puts it, start giving them shit, and walks over and just grabs them by the nuts, and it's just no, this is how you speak to ladies, and it's just oh, yes, ma'am, and that's that's sort of the different angles of the characters coming through. Chi-Chi's angle is more of on a romantic side, but in a flirtatious, dangerous flirtatious way that puts themselves in a bad situation, which does happen, especially Patrick Swayze getting grabbed by the cop earlier on, and that's why the cop gets knocked out.
Yeah, it's the cop stuff is interesting because it's a whole subplot of just real toxic masculinity. Because it's first of all. Well, actually, the cop is first of all, the cop is racist. Yeah. Because he thinks they're all women, and he takes Patrick Swayze's character, what's her name? Vida. Yeah. He takes Vida out of the car and is it's not normal for white women to be traveling with
racist.
Yeah, racist slur. Yeah. Essentially, a black person and a Hispanic person. Yeah. But he don't use those words. No. He uses incredibly racial slurs. But then he tries to rape her. Yeah. Discovers that she's got a penis.
That's one of my favourite quote from that movie is, get your hand off my dick, buddy.
Yeah. That, by the way, apparently the reaction of Chris Penn in that scene is legitimate, because what Patrick Swayze did was, before they filmed it, he put a corn cob into his underwear, so that when he went to feel it, he was like, what the hell? Which I think is hilarious. But
country girls make do.
Yeah, so, but then, later on, you get the cop again, but he's,
explaining it to his colleagues, and they're just taking the absolute piss out of him.
Yeah, but they're laughing at him because he was attacked by girls. Yeah. So it's again, that toxic masculinity shit, that they're being like, you got beat up by a girl, you're weak, and so, because he, it's threatening to his masculinity. They obviously don't give a shit that he attempted to rape the woman. Yeah. That's not a concern. It's that it's just funny that he got attacked or he got beat up by a girl. And then he starts calling them perverts because what I think what he said is, you'll find something down there that's not right. Yeah. So that's incredibly transphobic as well as just like shitty to the drag queens. Also, he shouldn't be finding out what's down there on anyone. There's no reason for that. But he calls them perverts because of it. And then what he says is that he's going to bring back 3 corpses so they can check up their skirts.
Yeah.
Which is like ridiculously transphobic, homophobic,
but
misogynistic.
Let's take a pause on that. No offense to the good police officers that are in the States right now, but there are some shitty cops, and it's never going to change because their entire system is broken.
Mm-hmm.
Their unions are way too strong, and it's only social media. Childish Gambino actually makes a point of it in This Is America.
Right.
Because it was a catchy song and everyone liked the song, but the actual meaning of the song is literally young black people use your phones to protect each other and record your interactions with cops, because like I have seen it in so many movies, because it's just not. I'm white. I didn't have this. I had small town. Cops are bored. They pick on young kids, but it was never a racist thing. It was just because they're bored, and I know this for a fact because that's what cops do when they're bored. They just find kids walking down the street. Legitimately, I had a reason. I was going to Mobile to get a pie, but and I had been drinking. But it was never the racist part of it. And I think even when I was younger, I did notice the nice cops were always younger Māori descent people,
right?
Where the cops that would give you shit are the older white men with the buzz cuts and the mustaches that they've had for 40 years. Like they're
the guys who think they're in the military.
Yeah. And I think there's New Zealand policing has changed quite a lot because we had more of a public face, I think, and despite all the Police 10-7 memes, policing in New Zealand is pretty good. I wouldn't say it's great. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying it's pretty good in comparison to other countries.
For our non-Kiwi listeners, we think you should check out a documentary called Wellington Paranormal.
Yeah, Wellington Paranormal is a perfect example of New Zealand policing. No, because it's like Police 10-7 was a meme.
Right.
It is a meme. It was like, like I always say it, I've always quoted it in The Voice. It'd be like, tonight in South Auckland, Police 10-7, because it was just exclusively South Auckland, because that's where they would have got the most alarming footage.
Right.
It's the same where like everyone thinks Florida's crazy. That's because their police records aren't sealed. So you can find out that some dude tried to have sex with an alligator and got his leg bitten off. Like that's and then tried to walk through the McDonald's drive-through or something. Like
that
whatever.
Does sound like Florida, man.
Whatever. Like, but yeah, you do have like this toxic culture of cops, and they portrayed it in the movie really well.
Yes.
Because it's not just the fact that the cops are racist and a bigot and a attempted rapist. It's also the fact that even his own support structure doesn't help him.
Yeah.
Because it's just so broken from all aspects of it. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I thought the least believable part was that when he comes to the town and the women kind of stand up for the drag queens, he just turns and leaves.
Yeah, there wasn't...
He wouldn't have turned and left. He would have started shooting people.
The whole no, I'm Spartacus moment was really brilliant.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, it's when Hollywood was obsessed with ancient Rome, and it was a story about Spartacus, and then when the guards turn up to arrest Spartacus, the person who's not Spartacus stands up and says, I am Spartacus, and then the other person stands up, and the tropes carried on forever.
Yeah, and in Tu Wong Fu, it's they're looking for the drag queens, and
all the ladies stand up and be like, I'm a drag queen, no, I'm a drag queen.
Yeah, I'm the drag queen.
Yeah. That's brilliant. I think the sequences in Priscilla are slightly more fun let's talk about Bob, because Bob is a fantastic character. So he's the opposite of Tu Wong Fu. He's the one nice mechanic.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he married the wrong woman.
Yeah, so it's... I don't think quite stated, but they show us flashbacks a little bit, and it's heavily implied. So basically, what happened is he was drunk, and this woman got him to marry her because she thought he lived in Sydney, and she wanted him to take her to Sydney.
Yeah.
But instead, he lives in this tiny town in the middle of the desert, and he takes her there, and she's like a showgirl, and she shoots or squeezes like ping pong balls out of her ass. Is it? Or out of a different part of her body? Yeah. It's ambiguous which part, but she puts them in somewhere, and then they come out.
Yeah, it's a ping pong show. They are very famous in Thailand.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's the whole thing. I'm assuming he was on holiday in Thailand because a lot of Australians go there because their dollar is so strong. And basically, even like a working Joe, like a mechanic who saves up for a couple of years would go live over there like a king for a month.
Right.
Just because of economic differences.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would probably be the sequence, and it's just him trying to control this woman who's clearly, I wouldn't say out of control, but she's obviously got something. Because she's very aggressive.
Yeah.
Banned from the bar, not allowed to drink, and then as soon as they're out of the house, she breaks into a secret cupboard, and there's rained ping pong balls on her, and she's just like yes, my baby.
Deranged almost. Yeah.
And then arrives in the thing in full lingerie with like her stage outfit on, which has a zip for easy access to her ping pong launcher.
Yep, the ping pong launcher.
And in comparison to these drag queens have got on stage and danced for this this local town.
Yeah.
The only person who cares, the only person who's enjoying it is Bob.
Yeah, he's stated that he's like gone to shows specifically in other places, so he's a little bit more cultured, I think.
Yeah.
Is the implication.
It's interesting because myself as well, I haven't seen a ping pong show. I'm just saying that not for just clarity. I'm just saying to you, Lisa. I'm also saying in general, not hiding something in the background there. I have seen the Australasia's winning of that year pole dancer perform.
Okay.
And she was insane.
You have to be really strong to do pole dancing.
Really strong and fearless, because the pole that I saw at the bar, which is now gone, because every bar in Wellington I ever liked closed. Maybe that's something to do with me. No, it's just because they're just not they're not on the main drag.
Yep.
When you see someone climb up a pole and they're hanging on to the pole with just their inner thigh, and they've got no arms and no legs touching the pole, and then they slide all the way from the top of it, and I'm talking this is bigger than a standard house roof size. This was a full stage level roof, all the way from the top to the bottom and stop centimeters off the ground.
Yeah.
And the entire crowd went bananas because it was so insane.
Yeah.
And just the work that she was doing and performing is insane. And then you see, what I'm going to say is, I went to a friend's, bachelor party, and terrible, pole dancers that you see at a gentleman's club is a nice way to put it. Do 1 day week of training of how to use a pole as if it was a lover or some shit, just absolute garbage. Absolute garbage.
Oh, they're trying to achieve different things, I guess. Because one is just trying to be visually appealing or sexually appealing maybe to the people at the club, whereas the other is doing an actual sport.
Yeah, but there's that's true, but there's also the same element in professional pole dancing that there is in that. It's just that's the amateur level.
Yeah. That's
there for the money rather than the actual sport.
Yeah, yeah. I saw pole dancers in Dublin. I went with some of my classmates for life drawing, because we would draw people in movements. We went to like a ballet studio and people doing pole dancing, and just the sheer strength involved in it is terrifying. It's
I
like,
also know a guy who did pole dancing,
Yeah.
and like he was getting compliments from the ladies by because they were jealous of some of the things he was being able to pick up earlier, and he's just like it's just it's biology. It's
Yeah,
not,
it's just
not
that
fair.
I don't have to use as much time to build up my lower body strength. Yeah.
But back to Bob, because he's the most important character. Bob has a horrible wife.
Yeah.
From his point of view, because he
Yeah, but he's
been shanghaied.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you meet them first, you can tell that like he's like shutting her down a lot, and I was like, oh, he's being shitty to her, like the mechanic is shitty to his wife in Tu Wong Fu.
Yeah, there's a big difference.
And then it's like, oh, okay, she totally manipulated him into this marriage, and yet he is still trying to uphold it and be, the polite, So it's a very different situation. Whereas in Tu Wong Fu, the mechanic is physically and emotionally abusive.
Yeah, he's a domestic. I was going to say he's a domestic violence. That doesn't make
he is a domestic violence.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, no, the domestic violence in Tu Wong Fu is a lot more real.
Yeah.
Like as in realistic rather than.
Yeah, I do like there is a moment where Vida is conversing with Carol Ann, who is the wife of the mechanic in that, and she's got bruises on her face. She says, I opened the cupboard and some boxes fell down. And then when Vida is leaving, she's like, well, good cover with that. I used to say similar things when my father would, whatever. Yeah. And it's like, okay, so, the history of abuse there.
Yeah, you can definitely tell you can smell their own kind of material of people being abused by their family.
But Bob, anyway.
Yeah, no, sorry, I just want to touch on something. Vida is trying to help in that sequence.
Yeah.
Comes in to cook. She's cooking, and it's just that whole sequence of like, he doesn't like spice in it. Vida put paprika in there.
Yeah.
Like you can't handle any spicy water. Yeah, but I put
paprika on things.
I put a tiny amount of white pepper in our food. And
I can't eat it.
You like my lips are tingling, and I'm like, this isn't even hot.
You're like, it's fine. I'll put a teaspoon of white pepper in this whole thing, or like one little shake, and then I'll be like, you put white pepper in this, but paprika I can eat no problem.
Yeah, it's quite funny. He's like, it's too spicy. It's like, wow, white people stop. White people stop.
You're a white people.
Yeah, but I eat food that would like.
I don't think it's because I'm white. I think it's a combination of the fact that I do have a capsaicin allergy, and then also, I just was a very picky eater growing up, so would have like very bland foods by choice because I didn't like eating new things. So probably I'm just very much not used to stuff like that. So my body's like, what is this? Reject this.
Versus me, who would eat an entire jar of like jalapenos. And,
you just drink a bottle of hot sauce.
Yeah. When you bought me that what was it, Carolina Reaper? No, it wasn't. It was you bought some homemade hot sauce for me recently. Yeah. And it was like.
I think Alana made it. I think.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
You were just there was like a warning label on it, and I tried it, and I was like, it's a nice warning. It's a white people warning label. I'll eat jalapenos for as a side dish, where other people are like, I put one on there. It's too
that's good to know. Because that means if we go to Vegas together and we go to Nacho Daddy, we can get the vegan loaded fries or vegan loaded nachos, and I could say, can you put the jalapenos on the side, and then you'll just have a plate full of jalapenos.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, and then I don't have to worry about the jalapenos touching my nachos.
Yeah, because it's like sorry, we're on a run here, folks, but that's fine because that's what you're here for. Those ramen that I have, the gourmet spicy, the Korean ones, the reason I like them when I eat 2 packets of them is because my ears ring.
Right.
I physically sweat.
Yeah.
Because, random fact for you folks sitting at home, the Sherpas that go up Mount Everest, they don't have advanced clothing like the people that used to go there in the time of the famous Sir Edmund Hillary did. So what they did was they ate incredibly spicy food. And that obviously your body releases endorphins, so your muscles heal faster, and also you are warm, and that's how they did it. So here was these professional mountain climbers wearing these fancy state-of-the-art clothing that was supposed to protect you from the weather, and there'd be just Sherpas in woolen stuff eating chili, and did the exact same thing. So there's a fact for you.
They're warming up from the inside out.
Yeah.
What were we saying about the movies?
So that's why I've been eating spicy ramen lately, because it's been cold. Bob.
Yeah.
Back to Bob. Sorry. Bob is the best character that's not the main three.
Okay.
Like, I like his wife. I like some of the other characters I come across, but Bob is just fantastic because you're right. He's inclusive. He does all those. He's like there with them and helping them through with their the petrol tanks. They ran the petrol tank empty, and because there was a lot of settlement, it clogged their lines, which is true. You should never run your gas tank empty in a car that old or any vehicle that old.
Yep.
But yeah, no, Bob is the best.
Yeah, it's interesting because Bob has a character arc as well, because at the start, he refers to them as boys, and then he's like, "Oh, sorry, and lady, or whatever." And by the end of it, he's like fully 100% accepting of Bernadette, and they are starting, or it's implied that they're starting a relationship together. They decide to stay in Alice Springs together, which is sweet. I guess the other main thing in Priscilla to touch on is
Tig's son.
Yeah, Tig's son. So Hugo Weaving's character Anthony, I've forgotten what his drag name is, but they just call him Tig most of the time.
Yeah.
He has a whole lot of. It's basically a story of internalized homophobia, is how I would describe it. Which a lot of queer people will have experienced. That they have faced so much discrimination in their life that they expect it.
Yeah.
So there's this whole thing when they get to Alice Springs that, he meets his son who he hasn't seen in years, and
gets his wife to promise that he won't be there for the show.
Yeah, so his wife tells him the son will be in bed when they do the show, and then he does the show and sees his son there and just panics and then just faints.
Passes out, yeah.
And then he gets really upset about it. But like throughout the whole movie, you can see him being anxious, and then eventually he reveals he has a son, blah, blah, blah. And there's questions of, does he know what you do for a living, whatever. And he is so scared that his son is going to not accept him.
Yeah.
Or that seeing him in drag will make his son reject him, or make his son feel like there's a problem or whatever, and you find out that so Tig doesn't say it, but I can't remember if Bernadette or Adam asks the son, does he know that his dad is gay or something like that, but the son says, the son asks, does my dad have a boyfriend? And they're like, no. Does your mom have a boyfriend? And he's like, no, but she's had girlfriends before. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because obviously the mother is, at the very least is accepting of Tig being a gay man, and is definitely accepting of him being a drag queen, because she's asked him to come and be a drag queen at her casino. And yet we find out then that she's queer herself. And yet it's never occurred to him that she would have raised the son to be accepting.
Yeah.
He's just, his whole time, he's just picturing his son as the same as children of people who are discriminatory.
Yeah.
So he thinks his son is going to discriminate against him, or is going to be upset by him, or is, whatever. But obviously the son has been raised, knowing...
Properly.
Yeah, he's been raised well. He's been raised by a queer woman, knowing that his father is queer, and knowing that these things are normal. It's never... So for him, this is just how life is, and that's how it should be. But you see Tig is still anxious about it the whole time, and then it's right near the end, the son asks him directly, because he's gonna take him back to Sydney with them for a couple of weeks or whatever while the wife goes on holiday, and the son asks him directly, "Will you have a boyfriend when we go back there?" And he's like, "I don't know, I might." And he said, "That'll be good."
Yeah.
And suddenly he, this weight is lifted off him that he's like, there was never any evidence that the son was going to be negative.
Yeah.
It's entirely in his own mind. He's built up this idea that, based on his experiences, that being gay is bad, being a drag queen is bad, and my son is going to see it that way.
Yeah.
And it's never occurred to him that it won't be a problem, and I think it's really speaks to how much people internalize that shit. So I thought it was really, really good. It was just really, really good representation. I thought that's because that is how a lot of people feel.
Yeah. The no one's born a bigot, no one's born a racist.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I think the biggest standpoint, the one where it's the most obvious. Well, maybe it's not the most obvious. The one that was most obvious to me is American History X.
Right.
Because you have Edward Norton's character talking about how much he likes his African American teacher,
mm-hmm.
and then his father saying racist ass rhetoric to him. Then his father gets killed by the same people he spoke ill of, and then automatically the son is like, oh well, it's all true then.
Yeah. And then obviously he passes it on to the younger brother.
Yeah.
Which that's a very tragic film.
I like that movie.
Yeah, it's good, but it's definitely very tragic.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is that very much, people are influenced by their surroundings, and when you're raised by
bigots.
Yeah, I was going to say when you're raised by, an accepting
sorry.
queer woman.
The opposite. The right way to be raised.
But I mean, when you're raised and those are the kind of people that you're around, and it's, that is normal to you, and you will grow up to be more accepting.
Yeah.
I think everyone should be raised with knowing minorities.
Everybody out there, your dad should be gay and your mum should be a lesbian, and then you'll be perfect.
No, I mean, it doesn't have to be that, but you shouldn't be. I mean, I get it that minorities are called minorities for a reason, and that there will be obviously places where you're less likely to come across minorities as you age, and maybe you can't be exposed to people in person from a young age. But I think where possible, I think it generally has a positive impact on children to be raised in, or around diverse people.
Yeah, I think diversity is very important for I think that's why we have a lot of problems going back to ragging on Auckland, because it's very clustered.
Mm.
People have their own communities and they don't associate with each other, and that was even a big problem when I was living there, and that was everyone was Winston Peters, who's a very famous politician in New Zealand, was outed because he used to say racist shit all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Did win him the grey power vote, not gonna lie to you. Grey power being old people. And consistently because they love him. But he was warning the New Zealand public if we don't have strong immigration laws when it comes to because we were getting an influx of Asian people, because I remember it, there were none and then they were everywhere. Right. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I love Asian people.
The Asians are everywhere.
But there was a point in New Zealand where there were none and then they were everywhere, and it all came in one giant wave crashing. And obviously it was quite obvious because I was in Auckland at the time, where it was on the radio. There was little clippets of Winston Peters saying what he was saying. And I think the issue is that I have no problem with people immigrating to other countries as long as they actually immigrate to another country and they're not just taking them and inserting themselves into another country and then just making, we don't have a little island and somewhere, we don't have that's...
But it's also, as an immigrant, it's a very natural thing. Because when I was coming over here first, I had multiple people from Ireland say to me, "Oh, I know so and so from here who's out there. Get in touch with them," or this person lives in New Zealand now, and don't worry, you can find local GAA clubs, which is Gaelic Athletic Association, and that's where you'll find the Irish people, and you can hang out. And I experienced it in Canada. That like, I did an internship in Canada in a financial place. Which is not remotely what I do now, but I was working just doing like Adobe forms and things, and then they moved me to a team because they said there was like 5 of us doing these forms, and it was ridiculously boring, but they had a team that needed an extra person, and they said, "Oh, you'll fit in, half of them are Irish." And when I went there, they were all like, "Oh yeah, we hang out with the Irish community." So there are Irish communities around, and it is very natural, I think, for a lot of people, especially extroverted people or people who feel a need for a sense of community when they move to a new country, to look for people like them and to build a community or join a community. Now, I mean, I do it through the Time Bank, which are not, they're actually quite diverse. They're people from all over the place are part of that, but it's that same feeling of having like community. I just didn't look for Irish people to join a community. But very much it is a thing. And I know like my cousin did a visa in Chicago, and the place that she stayed was in the area of Chicago where all the Irish people live. People were shocked when I lived in Australia that I lived in Brisbane, because Melbourne is where all the Irish people are. It's a legitimate thing, and maybe to you it's more visible when it's an influx of Southeast Asian people because they look different to you, whereas you might not know, looking at a group of Irish people, that they're a group of Irish people.
I just look for the green and the
Am I wearing green? No. Yeah, but I think it is very, very natural, because I find that even like in Dublin, that like my area that I grew up in Dublin, when I was growing up, it was very much white, because all of Ireland was very much white at that time.
Don't get a lot of sun, so that makes sense.
Well, it still is. I mean, it is a country where the indigenous people are white people. Which you can't say for most of the world. Most of the world, the white people are the people who moved there and colonized.
You said conquered incorrectly.
But very much the area that I grew up in Dublin nowadays is home to a rich Indian community. And I discussed this at work here with a colleague who's from India. He was saying that he was looking at videos from around the world of celebrations of, I can't remember which festival it was, but it was an Indian festival, and he said he was really surprised to see how many Indian people are in Ireland. He was like, "Oh, I'm shocked that my people are in your home country." And I was like, "Yeah, no, actually literally in the area I'm from in Dublin is where there's this really big Indian community." But I think it's very natural for, I don't know how we got onto this, I can't remember anymore, but I do think it's very natural for people immigrating to a country to look for a sense of community before they feel like they fit in.
Yeah, there is a downside to that though, which is when it becomes such a community for one group of people that I'm not going to say force out, because that's incorrect. I'm saying the diversity now is gone.
Yeah, I think there's definitely problems. I think that's why I never gravitated towards those kinds of communities. I understand wanting to be with people who have your shared experience. So, people who have come here from the same place as you, who grew up in the same place as you, whatever. But you shouldn't only interact with those people. Yeah. You need to integrate more.
I won't go into it now, but there are a lot of small countries that have much smaller populations than New Zealand, where literally their economy has been, of the native people there, been absolutely decimated by, I wouldn't say hostile immigration, but I can't think of a better term. And I've keyed that phrase, if that is an actual phrase, isn't a phrase, sorry, of when you immigrate to a country because you know for a fact that you can exploit the fact that when you get there you will be able to buy a business owned by a local person and then fire all the local people and then hire your own people in
Right.
and then literally destroy the entire economy of the native people. And it happened, but it happened years ago when people used to turn up with smallpox blankets and muskets. It wasn't the same. You can actually watch it happen now over a smaller amount of time because immigration is a lot more fast in these days. It's not like you have to spend 6 months on a boat and then 12 months on a back of a I was going to say horse-drawn cart, but that is right, isn't it? Yeah, to get across a large amount of space versus flying in. Flying in's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Wings are on everything.
We're running long at the moment. Do you want to go to trivia and then wrap up, or do you have more to say about the films?
No, I'm happy with that. I was going to say that ages ago, but we've gotten into. It's been a ranty episode.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a ranty
It's
episode.
because I think being as Pride Month, I think it's just it's not excluding anyone has been the most important part, and I think both these movies touched on it really well.
Yeah.
Because you can be as positive as you want about the community and different communities, regardless if it's based on your gender, sexuality, ethnicity, country of origin. It's celebrating and showing that in a way that is a sort of a cultural point.
Yeah.
Especially with these movies.
I think in our 2 episodes we've done so far of queer films, we've managed to touch on the L, the G, the B, and the T, I think.
Yeah.
Because the last one had lesbians and bisexual women. This one we've got gay men and trans women. Maybe we need to, I don't know, we'll go into other letters of the alphabet for future episodes.
Bring it on!
But it depends on if there's films about them in the first place. But I think both these films, while being very positive films about the queer community, about the drag community, they also were very, they did touch on discrimination quite a bit and, how people experience that and how people internalize that, like I said. The other thing is discrimination within the drag community is a thing. Which is still ongoing at the moment. I'm not huge into drag stuff, so I don't know a lot about it, but I know bits and pieces that definitely for a long time, and I think it's gotten much better nowadays. But it's really interesting to see it in this film, considering it came out in the early or mid-90s. There's a lot of discrimination against trans women who do drag. Because as you see in To Wong Fu, very much the idea is, you're a boy in a dress or you're whatever. And you get to see some of that discrimination happen in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, because Adam, Guy Pearce's character, keeps calling Bernadette Ralph, which is her dead name. And it's just really, I don't know how to describe how negative it is to call a trans person by their dead name.
Yeah.
Because it's you can instigate real serious trauma with that. And he's doing it purposely to rile her up and to upset her. And it's just really shittily done. But the fact of the matter is that her as a trans woman who does drag, she will experience that kind of discrimination on a regular basis, especially at that time period. And that's probably part of why at the beginning she's not too happy that Adam's going with them. So she understandably is very upset when he calls her by her dead name.
Look, the reality is about Guy Pearce's character Adam is he has a poop necklace, and that basically throws all of his opinions out the window.
Yes, he does have a necklace with poop in it.
Yeah.
We're not going to explain that any further. Watch the film.
Yeah.
So trivia. One of the ones I thought was fun was due to the heavy filming schedule of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. a lot of filming was done while the entire crew was on the road, but because the bus is such a small set, there's no room for the crew. So in most of the scenes that you see of the bus, the crew are hiding in plain sight. They've got like clothes draped over them or things like, or they were like in the clothes rack or hiding under things. So the crew are in those scenes. Apparently there's scenes where you can see them. I didn't notice them though. But I just thought that was really funny. They're just hiding under props. What else did I say? Oh yeah, we've already touched on Broken Hill, the town that started doing its drag parade afterwards. The director said he got the idea for the film because he saw a plume of feathers break from a drag queen's headdress during Sydney Mardi Gras parade, and it tumbled down a deserted street like tumbleweed in a Sergio Leone western. So he wanted to do a film about drag queens driving across the desert. He essentially made a western, but with drag queens. I think was his goal. So I thought that was fun. So apparently Steven Spielberg was sent the script for To Wong Foo, and he was on a flight with Robin Williams at the time. I assume related to Hook, because I know they did that together around that time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So he was on a flight with Robin Williams, and he got Robin Williams to read the script to him, and he said he was so mesmerized by Robin Williams.
John Williams' score.
Yeah, by Robin Williams' cold reading of the script that he really wanted to work on it. So they already had a director signed on, but she was 9 months pregnant when she was signed to direct. So he said to her if she needed to leave the production, he would direct the film. But connected to that, she gave birth to her child, whose name is Noah, on the last night of filming.
Wow.
So he's credited in the crew credits as best baby, which I thought is cute. And then the only other note that I took down from IMDb trivia, because a lot of it, which seems to happen, and it's interesting because it's like every now and then we get these in films, but not all the time. But a lot of them were just like these people were in talks to play these characters, whatever. But the one that I took down was that Viggo Mortensen auditioned for the role of Vita Bohem, which is the Patrick Swayze character. And I just thought it would have been really funny if he got it, because then we would have been talking about an Aragorn drag film versus a Elrond drag film.
Yeah. Because what was I joking about before? You were asking me if I wanted to watch Sonic, and then you're like, Idris Elba, they should have got someone Australian to play Knuckles. And
yeah, because he's in Echidna.
Yeah.
They should have got an Australian to play Knuckles the Echidna.
And then my joke was having Hugo Weaving as Elrond playing Knuckles.
Yeah. I would have liked to see Hugo Weaving as Knuckles.
Just dob over it with sound effects from Logan.
From Logan?
From Logan. Hugh Jackman. He's Australian.
Yeah, I was like, Hugo Weaving isn't in Logan. Hugo Weaving is Red Skull. You're mixing them up. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think Hugo Weaving was big at all at the time this was made. And apparently, because I think that was one of the trivia notes as well, was that, at the time it was considered kind of career suicide to play a gay man in a film.
Tell it to Tom Hanks.
Yeah. Well, that was later. I think Philadelphia was later in the 90s.
Maybe 8, maybe 98.
Yeah, I thought 98, 99 or something. But it was apparently considered career suicide to play a gay man in a film at that time, and yet Hugo Weaving, who plays Anthony.
No.
When was what?
Philadelphia's 93.
Oh wow! I thought it was later for some reason. Okay. It wasn't career suicide for Tom Hanks at all. But Hugo Weaving went on to be in the Matrix trilogy and in the Lord of the Rings trilogy and in the Marvel MCU films and whatever else. The film he did, I think, directly after Priscilla was one we've already talked about, Babe.
Yeah.
Really did not kill his career. He's had a multi-decade career since then, and he's pretty much a household name, I think, Hugo Weaving.
The Guy Pearce, on the other hand, he's been all over the place.
He's in the MCU as well.
Yeah, he just reminds me a lot of Ethan Hawke. They do really good movies,
but few and far between.
But very few and far between, and I think it's more along the lines of like, oh, we can't afford a really good actor. Let's go get like so and so, and he'll do it.
You sure they're not doing the Ed Norton thing of picking and choosing what films they want to be in?
Maybe.
Because Ed Norton's good in pretty... Well, I haven't seen him in stuff recently, but he's good in pretty much everything I've seen him in.
He did win an Oscar for his first performance.
Did he win for
Or was he nominated?
He was definitely nominated for Primal Fear. I don't know if he won for it. It was a fantastic performance, though. Yeah, he very much picks and chooses the films he wants to be in. Anyway, we've run on very long at this point.
It's alright.
So we will end
celebrating an entire month. We're gonna have long episodes.
Yeah. We'll be back next year with more queer films, but in the meantime we have.
I had no idea where you were going just then. I was like, what?
Yeah, no. In the meantime, we'll have 20 something other episodes.
24.
I'm trying to think, what do we have next? So this is episode 24, I believe, which means our next episode is one that we've pre-recorded a couple of months in advance, because it's a fun episode. You're trying to remember what it is.
I don't know.
I'm not going to say on here.
I'm just talent here, right?
And then
I know movie good.
The episode after that will be our second episode that is a fan suggestion, a listener suggestion from our joint number one fan, Floyd.
Oh, it was like Strider?
He's our producer. No, my mom and Floyd are our joint number one fans. They're the people who tell us every week that they've listened to the podcast and what they thought of it.
True.
Sometimes as they're listening to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got a Floyd suggestion. It will be the next one we're recording, but it'll be 2 episodes away. So
it's complicated and I've already forgotten.
That's alright. No one needs to remember.
Thank you for listening. You can find us online if you listen to what Lisa has to say, because I can't remember them all.
You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at ittakes2_pod, or Facebook at ittakes2pod, and our website is ittakes2.co.nz.
It's not my fault. You're the one that made them.
What?
You're the one. You made them, so therefore you remember them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was just letting you go ahead with it, because I was like, oh, he's gonna say it this time. Never does. All right.
Thank you for joining us. We'll catch you next time.
Goodbye.